Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rob Orson with the Emerging Revolutionary War. Thank you for joining us in our recent Revelry, our podcast. We've been covering different topics with the American Revolution, and recently we've been really focusing on the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution coming up and all the events leading up to it. And I'm very happy to have Stephen Wilson here with us today, our Executive Director at St. John's Church Foundation. Wonderful museum. I'm sure he'll talk more about it as we get into it, but I want to thank Stephen for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Rob, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, we are very excited. And we are on the eve of the 250th anniversary of Patrick Henry's speech. I serve as executive director for the St. John's Church Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has been around since the 1930s. Our mission is really focused on preserving the historic site where Patrick Henry delivered his immortal "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. That was a speech delivered on March 23rd, 1775, 27 days before the first shots were fired at Lexington and in Concord that started the American Revolutionary War, and a speech which will, in about 3 weeks, celebrate its 250th anniversary. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to take folks through a PowerPoint presentation and talk about some of the history of the historic site, the events that led up to the big day, March 23rd, 1775. I will, even though I'm not in a 1700s costume, I will do my best to reenact some or all of Patrick Henry's speech. And then we'll close off by talking about plans to commemorate the speech later this month.
That's fantastic. And for those listening or even watching, he does. I've seen him do the speech before. It's fantastic. I don't know how you do it without notes, but you live it every day down there. So I look forward to it. And it's crazy how fast we've gotten here. I don't know if you feel this way, but it feels like just a couple of years ago we said, "Oh, we got this anniversary coming up. We need to get ready for it." And then you just kind of blink and you wake up like, "Oh, just a few weeks we're going to be in Richmond for the anniversary." So I know you guys have been working really hard to get ready for it, and so
For
I'm
it's
looking forward to
Yeah,
being there myself.
years in the making for us, but it is pretty wild to think that we are, we're right on the doorstep now. So
Yeah.
it's an exciting moment.
Yeah, so go ahead and start the presentation, and like I said, at the end, I'll ask you a few questions, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm going to do a shared screen.
Here we go.
Okay. All right. So what you'll see on this first screen, photo on the left is going to be what you would see if you come to our historic site. We are located in Richmond in the Churchill neighborhood. Churchill is the oldest neighborhood in Richmond, and yes, it is in fact named after St. John's Church. We are on Broad Street between 24th and 25th Street. Now, Rob, can you see my cursor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Okay. This church looks a whole lot different today than it did when it opened its doors in the 1700s. So in some of the subsequent slides, I'll show you some of the older photos of St. John's Church. But over on the right, top right, I included this photo because we offer live theater Liberty or Death reenactments, which feature 9 professional actors in 1700s costumes. We recreate the arguments and the debates that happened during the Second Virginia Convention, culminating with Patrick Henry's speech. We are a significant tourism driver. We have between 30 and 40,000 people per year come to our site, and about 50% of those visitors come from outside of a 1 hour's drive to the site. I included this photo that's up at the top because it's a family from Germany. So, not only are we, getting locals come to our site, but folks come from around the state, from around the country, and even from around the world. This is a good drone shot. This is a fairly recent photo. Now, if you can see my cursor, you can see that I'm pointing towards the bell tower. The bell tower was installed in 1829, so it is not original to the church. And then just behind that, where you see my cursor now, is going to be an addition that was put onto the church in 1772, 3 years before Patrick Henry delivered his speech. That addition is going to be very important because that addition makes this building the largest building in Virginia west of Williamsburg. It's a large building that can accommodate all of the delegates who came to the Second Virginia Convention in 1775. Now, just past it, where you see my cursor now, is the original church. This is the original structure. that opened its doors in 1741. And there, if you can follow my cursor, is the original front door to the church. Behind it's hard to see, but you can see where my cursor is, an addition that was installed in 1905. It's the newest part of the church. It was installed to accommodate an organ that was donated to the church. Not only is St. John's the oldest church in Richmond, but it's also the oldest public cemetery in the city of Richmond. A couple of our more notable residents would include George Wythe, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and Eliza Poe, the birth mother of Edgar Allan Poe. Interestingly, both of these are grave markers, not grave stones. I believe both of these grave markers were installed in the early 1920s, so they are not original. This is the oldest gravestone in the cemetery. It dates all the way back to 1751. It is the gravestone where you see my cursor. And if you follow my cursor now, that is the gravestone of Lieutenant Colonel Edward Carrington, who has a fascinating story regarding St. John's. He was at St. John's on March 23rd, 1775. He listened to Patrick Henry's speech through this window. So this window would have been open. He was not a delegate to the church, so he was outside the church, but he was so moved by Patrick Henry's words, he declared to those who were standing around him that he wanted to be buried in the very spot where he stood. So there is his grave. Some interesting fast facts about the St. John's churchyard. There are over 3,000 people buried in the churchyard, but there are only about 400 gravestones. Most persons were without a gravestone, and they would signify the grave by just putting a stick in the ground. There are 85 soldiers buried at St. John's who fought in the War of 1812, and 20 American patriots who fought in the American Revolutionary War. 2 persons who died in the Richmond Theater fire were also buried at St. John's. St. John's as a cemetery was in its heyday between 1800 and 1820. It was full in 1820. Shockoe Hill Cemetery is Richmond's second oldest cemetery. And I forgot to add that this is Richmond's oldest church, but is also an active and a diverse Episcopal parish. Now, I work for the foundation. I'm in the history business, but a separate organization, St. John's Episcopal Church, is an active and a diverse Episcopal parish. People have been worshiping at the church since the 1700s. Here you'll see an artist drawing of what the church looked like when it opened in 1741. Notice in the fine print, the population of Richmond in the 1740s was about 200 people. So, you know, I don't even feel comfortable calling it the city of Richmond. It is really just a very small town. And this is a church that is very small, very kind of plain, that would accommodate that very small population. Notice where my cursor is, that is the original bell. And some of you may have seen this at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, where it permanently resides.
You need to get that back.
We do need to get it back. I'll let the cat out of the bag on this one. Something we are getting back, at least temporarily, is that Patrick Henry's, I call it a letter opener, but it's actually a paper cutter. And Patrick Henry, when he said, "Give me liberty or give me death," he held this paper cutter up high and kind of acted like he was plunging it into his chest.
Right.
So it is going to make its triumphant return to our historic site on the big day. And it will be the first time that that paper cutter has been to St. John's, we believe, since 1775.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is an artist drawing of what the church would have looked like at the time that Patrick Henry delivered his speech. At this point, Richmond's population had grown to about 600 people, but still a very, very small town. Here are some interior images of the church. The photo on the right is going to be a postcard from the 1940s. This is really about what the church would look like today. And the photo on the left is that of a sounding board where my cursor is positioned. That sounding board was restored about 10 years ago at a cost to the foundation of approximately $100,000. I say that to say that historic preservation is very, very expensive, but this is the finest quality sounding board in Virginia. Some more images of the interior of St. John's. A question that we get asked often is, are the stained glass windows original and are they Tiffany? As you can see from this slide, they were installed between 1880 and 1920. They are not Tiffany, but they are of the Tiffany style. And for those of you out there who are familiar with VA 250, although he's got his back to the camera, you may recognize Delegate Terry Austin in this photo. He is the chair of the Virginia 250 Commission. A very famous picture of Patrick Henry delivering his famous speech. This image resides at the Library of Congress. And Rob, if you'll humor me for just a moment,
Yeah.
I am going to take folks back to the fourth grade. We've all heard the phrase "no taxation without representation" probably hundreds of times, but I just want to go through a quick chronology of events that get us to March 23rd, 1775.
Yeah.
Tea Act. It's going to be passed by Parliament in mid-1773. And notice the timeline. It's only a few months after the Tea Act is passed when on December 16th, we have the Boston Tea Party. That is, of course, the worldwide famous event when 342 chests of tea are going to be dumped into the Boston Harbor. Now, it's going to take some time for word to get back to England, but in March of 1774, about 1 year away from Patrick Henry's speech, Parliament is going to retaliate against Massachusetts for its participation in the Boston Tea Party. They are going to pass the first of the coercive acts, which are oftentimes referred to as the intolerable acts in the colonies. But the coercive acts are going to include the closing of the port of Boston. It's going to include the Quartering Act. Redcoats are going to be sent to Massachusetts. Those redcoats are going to be housed in citizens' homes. And the closing of the port of Boston is going to mean no commerce or no wares are going to be shipped from Massachusetts back to England. This is going to have a detrimental effect, obviously, on the economy in Massachusetts. You may be wondering why I'm discussing all of these events in Massachusetts. That is because in Virginia, the members of the House of Burgesses, your elected officials, are monitoring the situation in Boston. They are particularly concerned about the closing of the port of Boston because, we also have a major port here in Virginia, obviously the Chesapeake Bay. And if the Chesapeake Bay is closed, then that is going to have, a devastating effect on the economy here in Virginia. The members of the House of Burgesses decide to have a day of fasting and a day of support for Massachusetts. And then the royal governor of Virginia, it's actually the last royal governor of Virginia, Lord Dunmore, is going to retaliate against the members of the House of Burgesses for their showing of support by dissolving the House of Burgesses. This is going to happen mid-1774. The members of the House of Burgesses are going to respond by deciding that they're going to continue to meet. These are going to be a series of meetings referred to as the Virginia Conventions, oftentimes called the Virginia Revolutionary Conventions. There are going to be 5 of these meetings. They are going to be extra legal meetings because the members of the House of Burgesses are not going to have any legal authority, but they are going to continue to meet. The first of these meetings is going to be held down here in Williamsburg at the Raleigh Tavern. And if we fast forward just a few months, we are going to get to March of 1775. Now, at the first Virginia Convention, I believe there were 28 delegates. Don't quote me on that, but that's a pretty close number. But when we fast forward to the second Virginia Convention in March of 1775, there are going to be 120 delegates. Things are heating up. We are on the brink of war with the mother country, and this is going to be a big deal. Almost every county in the colony of Virginia is going to send 2 delegates. There are some counties who send 1, but almost every county is going to send 2 delegates. St. John's Church is going to be chosen as the site of the Second Virginia Convention because, number one, that addition that was put on in 1772 makes St. John's Church the largest building in Virginia west of Williamsburg, and it is an ideal meeting location because it can accommodate the 120 delegates who attend the convention. Reason number 2, I find this one very interesting. The rector of St. John's, and St. John's is actually part of the Church of England. It's part of the Anglican Church. So it is still going to be referred to as the Henrico Parish. But the rector of that church, his name is the Reverend Miles Selden. He is referred to as the Patriot parson, and he is going to allow these delegates to come to St. John's. He's sympathetic to the cause, which is pretty wild given that he is a representative of the Church of England. Mm-hmm. And then reason number three, these delegates do not want to meet in Williamsburg. There is concern that the Redcoats might get sent in. This ultimately does not happen, but the distance that Richmond provides provides a level of security, the 50 miles. So March 23rd is going to be the big day. That is the day that Patrick Henry will drop a bomb on his fellow delegates. He is going to propose a resolution for Virginia to establish a well-regulated militia. He is going to say to his delegates, we need to prepare for war against the mother country. Now, picture 120 delegates coming from around Virginia. You're going to have loyalists in the room. You're going to have revolutionaries in the room, and you are probably going to have some who are undecided. And there's going to be arguments and debates that occur both for and against that are going to lead up to Patrick Henry's speech. Who was there? Well, we know that George Washington was there. He's going to be one of two delegates representing Fairfax County. He is going to be for Patrick Henry's resolution to arm, as is Thomas Jefferson. So as you can see on this slide, they are aye votes. Some of the ones who are against or who were loyalists at the time would be Edmund Pendleton from Caroline County, Robert Carter Nicholas, who is the treasurer of the colony of Virginia. He will be representing James City County. Benjamin Harrison representing Charles City County. A few of the other ayes would include Richard Henry Lee, who is going to second the resolution. Thomas Nelson, who I believe is either 31 or 32 years old at the time, so he's very young. Richard Bland representing Prince George County. And I don't know if you can see the fine print, but I've included John Tabb. Most people have never heard of him. He is one of two delegates representing Amelia County. I don't know if he was for or against, but I do know that he is my sixth great grandfather. So I've included him in there.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Very right. It's pretty cool. I actually did not know that until about a year ago.
I was going to ask you if you knew that before working here. Okay.
I did not know that. So pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to see. This is fine print, but here's a list of the 120 delegates who attended the Second Virginia Convention. I'm going to come out of the presentation for a moment. Mm-hmm. All right. So we have reached that dramatic moment, the theatrical portion of the presentation. Rob, you can be a delegate representing your county. So if you hear me say something that you like, hear, well spoken, sir, something to that
I'm going to support everything you say.
Well, if you're a loyalist, you would say something like, he's crazy. This is insane. He speaks treason. So let's give this thing a shot. There has been arguments. There have been debates, both for and against Patrick Henry's resolution to arm. Peyton Randolph is going to serve as the president of the convention. So I will call off to Peyton Randolph and I will say, Mr. President. He will say, it's, the delegate from Hanover County, Mr. Patrick Henry, the floor is yours. I will then stand up and I will say, no man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as the abilities of the very worthy gentleman who have just addressed this house. But different men oftentimes see the same subject in different lights. So I shall hope that it not be thought of as disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do, opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall set forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before this house is one of awful moment to our country. For my own part, I shall consider as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. And in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way in which we can hope to arrive at the truth and to fulfill our great responsibility to God and to our country. Shall I hold back my opinions at such a time as this for fear of giving offense? I shall consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and an act of disloyalty against the majesty of heaven, who I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, it is natural for man to indulge in the illusion of hope, we're apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to that song of the siren until she transforms us into beasts. But is this the part of wise men engaged in an arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be among the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not? Those things which so nearly concern our temporal salvation. For my own part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cause, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging the future, but by the past. And judging by the past, I shall know what there has been within the conduct of the British ministry within the last 10 years that justify these hopes with which men solace themselves in this house. Could it be that insidious smile by which our petitions have been so lately received? Trust it not. It shall prove a snare unto your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our lands. Are fleets and armies necessary for a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? I beseech you, gentlemen, these are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. And I ask you, gentlemen, what means this martial array if its purpose not to be to force us into submission? Can gentlemen assign any other motive for Great Britain in this court of the world to call for this accumulation of armies and navies? No, sir. She has none. They were meant for us. They could be meant for no other. They were sent to bind and rivet upon us the chains with which the British ministry has been so long forging. And what have we to oppose them? Should we try argument? We've been trying that for the last 10 years. What have we new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up to every light by which it is possible, and it has all been in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? But what terms shall we find that have not already been exhausted? I beseech you, gentlemen, we have tried everything to avert this storm that is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, and we have prostrated ourselves before the throne to arrest its interposition into the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt at the foot of the throne. There are no longer any English, no Scots, no Britons, only a set of wretches, sunk in luxury, cowards, who can no longer look the brave Americans in the face. If we wish to be free, if we wish to preserve, inviolate those inestimable rights and privileges for which we have been so long contending and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our attention be obtained, then we must fight. I repeat it, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Shall it be in the next week or in the next year? Shall it be when we are totally disarmed and there's a British soldier stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength through irresolution and inaction? Shall we gather the strength of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs, hogging the delusive phantom of hope till our enemies have bound and shackled us hand and foot? No, sir. We are not weak. If we make a proper use of those things which the God of nature hath placed in our power, 3 millions of people armed, and in the holy cause of liberty. And in such a country as to which we possess shall be invincible by whatever force our enemies may send against us. Besides, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who will raise up forces to fight our battles for us. The battle is not to the strong alone. It is to the active, vigilant, the brave. Besides, we have no election. Even if we were base enough to desire it, it is already too late to retire from the contest. Our chains are forged. The clanking can be heard upon the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable. Let it come. I repeat it, let it come. It is in vain to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north shall bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, give me death. All right, that's it.
That, I mean, I didn't hiss or cheer on. It was amazing. I kind of think I kind of envision some of those delegates sitting there, and they all knew Henry well, right? They knew Henry, whether people loved Henry or hated Henry, and even historians debate this. The man was an orator, right? I mean, he could control a room. I can just imagine some of the people in that room just kind of in awe, right? About, him giving this speech. I think they all knew where he stood on the issues. He was very open about that. But I think some of the people there, I just imagine, were just kind of just listening to the show, right?
So, absolutely right. And I think, you've got some who are, they're in the Henry camp. And so they're going to be an I vote. And then you've got some like Edmund Pendleton, he's going to be a no vote. And then there's, just enough that, Henry was able to sway. And this is going to be a voice vote. Peyton Randolph's going to call to the delegates, for their vote. And this is going to be a resolution that will pass by just 4 or 5 votes. Right. So Henry doesn't persuade everybody in the room, but it's close. And word is going to travel to Massachusetts, and they are going to know before those first shots are fired 27 days later that Virginia has passed this resolution that if war breaks out, this will not be a regional conflict restricted to New England, that this will be a true revolution and will include the largest colony in area and wealth, and in population.
Right, right. And that's such a big thing too. I mean, born and raised in Virginia, I kind of be Virginia centric, and I get made fun of that. But when you read the letters of Sons of Liberty in Massachusetts and others in New England, they all write, we need, Virginia to kind of be with us on this. And Henry, as you just said, is really pushing that. It's amazing to me too that when you look at some of these delegates, like Washington, just before the Tea Party, wasn't there yet, right? Like he just wasn't at that. If he was asked to vote then, I think he would have said nay. I think Henry probably believed the same thing before the Tea Party. I think Henry was always on board with this notion. But to see how these more conservative, minded leaders start to slowly get brought into the revolutionary camp has always been fascinating to me to study and read about, because it's a huge.
Me too. It's easy to think, okay, were they a revolutionary or were they a loyalist? Were they a good guy or were they a bad guy? But with the revolutionaries, it's when, when did they become a revolutionary? And, we don't know how every single delegate voted. We know how most of them voted, but you heard me allude to my 6th great grandfather. I don't know how he voted, because this is a voice vote. And if there's no written documentation or a letter or something that says that, Tab was a yay or an aye, or he was a nay, we just don't know.
Right. And the documentation point is good. And I don't know if you know this, maybe you probably do, but how do we know what Henry said? Like,
so
how is that? I mean, I think I read a little bit about this, but for those who are watching, how do we know this? How do we know this is not something made up?
That is the question that I get asked most often. I spoke to a Rotary club the other day. They asked that question. So Patrick Henry does not write a speech down. Patrick Henry, is up there, kind of, whether he practiced what he was going to say in advance or not, we don't know. But what we do know is he didn't write it down. And so there's no written account of the speech. So how do we know what he said? His first biographer, a gentleman by the name of William Wirt, kind of cobbled the speech together some roughly 30 years after the Second Virginia Convention by pouring through primary source material, through letters, and also by interviewing people, who were there at the convention who were still alive. And he got the draft together. So it is certainly not a word for word account for what is said, but it is, it's the gist.
And when you look at Henry's other speeches that he makes earlier, it's, the Parsons calls and other things he's involved in, it's very Henry-esque, right? Like,
it is.
If you study Henry and you hear that speech, it sounds like something you would think Henry definitely said. I just think it's amazing. It's off the cuff, like you said, right? I mean,
it is. And, and I swear, I'm not an actor. I play around and, try to do my best. But Henry was really known as a very fiery speaker. And I wish I had the glasses on, because it was known that, when Henry would remove the glasses kind of mid-speech, that meant that it was on. He was going to ramp up, yelling and screaming. I don't know, but he would really get very fiery. And so, while I'm not an actor, I do try to bring that when I do enact the speech. So if you'll humor me, I'd like to go back to the PowerPoint for just a couple of minutes and kind of fly through these last few slides, because I do want to talk about plans to commemorate the 250th anniversary on Sunday, March the 23rd. Before we get to that, though, I do want to just briefly discuss some of the work that our organization takes on at the St. John's Church Foundation.
Yeah, please do.
All right. So I think this was the slide we were just on. Yep. So the importance of Patrick Henry's speech, and I think we discussed this, word had traveled to Massachusetts, and they were aware some 27 days later that Patrick Henry's resolution had passed. Liberty or death becomes a rallying cry among the colonies. And I do like including some of these images of give me liberty or give me death that have been taken around the world, including at Tiananmen Square in 1989.
Wow.
Yeah. Some additional images taken from around the world. And the photo on the left is actually, as you can see in the fine print here, taken at the Tiananmen Memorial in Boston, Chinatown, just back in 2022 as a protest against China's zero COVID policy. The mission of our organization is going to be focused on historic preservation and education. I'm going to fly through these slides. We are a significant tourist attraction. Between 35 and 40,000 visitors come to St. John's annually. We're really excited that Virginia Tourism, or Virginia is for Lovers, has St. John's Church on its cover for its 2025 Virginia Travel Guide. Now, this is a rotating cover, so we're going to be on the cover the first few months of the year, and these are the other two covers. The Chincoteague, hopefully I pronounced that right. I always thought it was Chincoteague, but somebody told me recently, they said, no, it's Chincoteague.
It's Chincoteague, yeah.
Okay, so good. Thank you for your confirmation. But the Chincoteague Pony Swim is the second cover, and then you can see a steam locomotive as well as being one of the covers. Some images from our live theater reenactments. Notice this is our Richard Henry Lee actor. Richard Henry Lee had a hand injury, so we make sure that he wears that glove or that wrap around his hand. Some additional images of our reenactments. I'll point to this photo on the left. You can see large audience. These reenactments will oftentimes, be anywhere between 100 and 200 people attending. We offer them every Sunday between Memorial Day and Labor Day. It's about a 40-minute performance. The reenactment was featured on C-SPAN's American History TV a couple of years ago. And if you were to go to their website and in the search field, type in reenactment St. John's, you can watch the entire reenactment. This is just a fun fact. The reenactment features 9 professional actors, but we do always choose someone from the audience to portray the rector or the Reverend Miles Selden. You can see here on the right, a very young gentleman got to portray the Reverend. And over on the left, VA 250's Delegate Terry Austin actually got to make his acting debut and portray the Reverend. We have a program for fourth grade students. It's a free reenactment for City of Richmond students and the surrounding counties. This is grant funded. We have a speaker series. You'll probably recognize some of these some of these gentlemen. On the left, you've got Doug Wilder. On the right, you've got George Allen. That's historian Andrew O'Shaughnessy on the right. Our speaker series last year included Christy Coleman, the CEO of the Jamestown Yorton Foundation, and you may recognize some of these other folks as well. We've had naturalization ceremonies at St. John's, including one back in 2022 when we welcomed approximately 50 new citizens to this country. Of course, historic preservation is going to be our #1 goal. That is raising lots of money to preserve the site and also engaging with volunteers as we've done. As you can see in these photos here, these are members of one of our DAR chapters, cleaning gravestones. Here's a before and after photo of a gravestone that actually I cleaned a couple of years ago. Our big fundraising campaign, we are on the tail end of raising about $500,000 to repair 70 gravestones in the churchyard, which we have done, but also we are repairing stained glass windows. And for any of you listening who know anything about stained glass repair work, you will know that it's very, very expensive. It's very time consuming. And these windows are huge, they are heavy, and they are very, very expensive. This photo is of a window on the right that cost the foundation about $40,000 to repair, and it is not one of the more expensive windows to repair. Some of them cost over $100,000 to repair. All right, so plans for 250. This is going to be the big weekend. March 23rd is Sunday, and on that big day, we are going to offer 3 Liberty or Death reenactments. They're going to be at 1:30, 3:30, and 5:30. Let me give you the bad news first. All 3 of these reenactments are sold out. The church is going to seat about 325 people. So that's the bad news. There will be musical performance before each reenactment in the form of an organist. But the good news is that the 1:30 p.m. reenactment, that will be the really big one, is going to be streamed by our friends at VA 250. So if you go to va250.org, you'll be able to view this reenactment as long as you are anywhere in the world with an internet connection, and that will be for free. That reenactment is going to be introduced by a celebrity. Stay tuned to the next slide. Portraying the Reverend Miles Selden in the 3 reenactments will include the past president of the University of Richmond, Dr. Ed Ayers, as well as Patrick Henry biographer, Dr. John Kukla. And we have actually unearthed a Reverend Selden descendant. So those will be the folks who will be portraying the Reverend, and we'll be having pop-up Liberty or Death speeches throughout the Richmond area. We'll be taking an actor to places like the state capitol and the VMHC and others around the Richmond area. And we hope to get a lot of news attention locally by doing that. All right, so 1:30 p.m. reenactment. We're going to have a celebrity, and it will be this gentleman here. Of course, I think everyone knows him, Ken Burns. And we're very, very excited to have him, welcome him. He is going to provide introductory remarks. And he's got, I think, Rob, you're familiar with this. He's got a new series coming out later this year called The American Revolution. It is, I believe it's 6 parts, 12 hours. So he'll be talking about 250, but he's also going to give a plug for his upcoming miniseries.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's all I've got for you. So let me come out of PowerPoint mode.
That's a lot. You guys.
That was, I know, I was talking fast. It's a lot of information.
No, I mean, what I mean by a lot is you guys are doing a lot, which is great. I was going to ask you, so what's your favorite part of your job?
So favorite part of my job, couple of things. I really like it when we can take the show on the road and do a Liberty or Death reenactment at a different location, mainly because we are introducing the reenactment in a different part of the state to folks who may have never come to St. John's, may never will come to St. John's, but maybe some of them will after seeing the reenactment. We did one a couple of weeks ago in front of I take that back, I don't want to exaggerate, about 700 of the 1,050 students at Hampton-Sydney College. So the vast majority of the student body on campus got to see the reenactment. I would say that's one of my favorite things when we go on the road. The other favorite thing, seeing the reenactment here at St. John's. And the other favorite thing I like, this is just personally, I love going out on speaking engagements and just interacting with folks and just generating interest about the site and hearing people say, I've never been there, I need to come, or I went there when I was a young person. I need to come back. Those are some of my favorite things.
And I wonder too, I mean, you can tell me if this is true or not, but when I talk about Patrick Henry's speech to just people, just general people, they always assume it happened in Williamsburg. And it's like, no, it happened in Richmond and people, I think, I know, and you guys have done a great job doing this, is getting the word out about what St. John's is and where it is, right? Like it's right there in Richmond. It's not on the capital side of the highway. It's not a Civil War site. I know
Right.
Richmond's known for its Civil War history, but the
Yes.
fact that this speech actually did not take place in the colonial capital at the time, it took place in Richmond. I think
So
you
we
guys are
hear
doing
that
a
a
lot
lot
of
too.
work on promoting that. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. I like to say two things. I like to say that it was at St. John's Church where liberty found its voice. I didn't make that up. We've been saying that for many years. But the other one we like to say that it was at St. John's where the spark for the American Revolution was ignited. Because just again, keep in mind that this was a speech which was delivered less than a month before those first shots were fired, up in Massachusetts.
Right.
And we are conveniently located. I mean,
Mhm.
we really benefit from the fact that you mentioned Colonial Williamsburg, that, we're a short drive from Colonial Williamsburg and we're right off the highway and we're kind of equidistant between Monticello, and Colonial Williamsburg. So we do catch a lot of folks who may be more interested in going to one of those two larger sites, but they get us in the middle.
And I think too, one of the best things about your anniversary, and I know the tickets are sold out, which I know you said it's bad news. I think it's great news. There's interest, right? Like I will never downplay the excitement that people have for this. But you guys continue to do this reenactment, not just on the anniversary date, not just the 250th. So many things that you see are being done right now are just happening on the 250th day of that event, where people watching or listening, they make it to Richmond in a year or two or months later, there's opportunities that you guys are going to be doing it again. Maybe not on the exact date, but they'll still get to be able to experience it in the actual building.
No, great point. Yes, so our next reenactment will be for the public will be in February, and then of course the 3 shows in March, and then we'll have our summer season every Sunday at 1:30 from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And you heard me mention earlier that about half of our visitors come from outside of a 1 hour's drive. So we are truly, and I know other historic sites as well, are benefiting from the fact that Richmond has gotten cooler, in recent years. More people are coming here. They're staying at, I'll give plugs for places like the Cork Hotel and some of the popular restaurants and breweries in the area. People want to come here to Richmond to experience these things. And while they're here, they'll come and visit St. John's.
Right, and it's a great site, and I've been coming there since I was a kid. And it's a great site. It's great to see all these things going on. The last question I have for you is, and you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but what do you think? Always end these interviews with people about what do you think the lasting impact is of Henry's speech? You've kind of already talked about that a little bit about how it being the spark and showing how that has shown up throughout time. But why should people come there to learn more about this speech?
So I think you kind of answered the question for me. Thank you very much. But it's if you come to the reenactment, experiential learning, you can almost kind of transport back in time to 1775, and these actors, and they're in the 1700s costumes, will sit throughout the church. And so, usually when you go to see a performance, whether it's a musical performance or an opera or acting, the performers are up on stage, whereas here you could literally be sitting beside Patrick Henry. So I would say for the person who comes here and attends that program, they really get experiential learning and a deeper understanding of the events that led to the American Revolution, that led to the forming of our nation. So I think, from a visitor experience, I think that's the impact. But I think you answered the rest of it. So yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that. Well, you kind of did.
No, I appreciate it.
You did in your presentation. So, last thing is, you had it on your last slide, but if you can let people know where to find out more about your organization and your site.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just put it back up for a moment?
That's perfectly fine. Yep. That's a good way to end. Yep.
All right. Hopefully it picks back up with that last slide. It does. Okay, so you can go to va250.org on the anniversary day. It'll be at their homepage, and they'll live stream it. If you want to learn more about happenings at St. John's, go to our website and you'll see that under bullet point number 2. This is not a fundraising drive, but of course, any nonprofit will tell you, if you like what you hear, be generous and try to support the work of the organization.
Yeah, it's important work too. Not just the anniversary event you guys are doing, which is the reason why we're talking, but you mentioned the stonework outside, the graveyard, the care of the windows, the care of the building itself.
It's
It's so important.
Thank you. And you heard me say this, that our mission is, it's partly it's education and then partly it's historic preservation. So we're raising funds for gravestone repair and stained glass repair and to keep the church bell working properly. But then we're also, bringing this program to 4th grade students,
Right.
so that they have a better understanding of the events that led to the American Revolution. So when we raise funds, it's to support the educational mission of the organization, but also to do the capital projects.
Right. Well, Stephen, thanks again for being with us today. For those watching, please visit the website. Go to the va250.org. If you can't be there on the actual date, see that live stream. If you can't make it there at some point in the future. If you can't be there for the anniversary, make it there in the future. It's a great site. I've been there. I'll be there on the anniversary. I'm going to brag a little bit. I'll be there. Not the 1:30 showing, but I'll be there at the later showing. But thanks again for sharing this great story and great job on the speech, by the way. I'm highly jealous of that. I can barely memorize a few sentences, so it was fantastic.
Well, thank you for that. I considered actually putting on the wig, so my apologies for not bringing
That's
that.
okay.
And
That's
thank
fine.
you for all the work that you're doing. These talks that I've watched some of them before, they're awesome. So
Okay, well, thanks for that.
congratulations on all the good work you're
And thank you all for tuning in. And as I said, we do 2 or 3 of these a month. And just go to our website, emerginglearningwar.org for more. Thanks again, Stephen. Everyone take care.
doing. Yeah, thank you.